set the scene then, I mean, these stage 2 hearings have followed on from the stage 1 hearings at the end of August. I think the length of the examination reflects a number of circumstances. I think, as I set out at the start of these hearing sessions, a number of those are beyond the control of the council. And obviously I appreciate it's been demanding, I think, at times to sit for 4 weeks in a relatively short order. That's not normal in modern local plan examinations. But nonetheless, it now enables me to kind of move forward on a number of matters in relation to the bulk of the plan. And what I would say, therefore, is that consequently, any further hearing sessions will be the exception rather than the norm. And I think that will, if that does arise, that will principally be because there are matters we cannot deal with in writing that arise from the main modifications consultation. In moving matters forward, it's clear that a number of actions will now follow from these hearings. What I will do is attempt to set them out in some sort of order in terms of the key actions. I think firstly, it's evident from various discussions that further work will need to be undertaken so that the plan is sound or can be made sound, and that relates to principally the evidence base being sort of clarified and confirmed. Again, I stress that is not unusual for local plan examinations, and nor do I consider it a reflection that the council was perhaps premature in submitting a plan for examination. These things arise. It's been 9 months already in examination. Things change, evidence evolves. In saying this, I'm also mindful that there is already an extensive evidence base behind this plan, perhaps because of the double 2015 submission and then the 2007 publication stages. So I think for Nuneaton, a number of the matters that have arisen from the hearings are more about refining and augmenting the evidence base, sustainability appraisal, rather than any sort of wholesale absence of critical information. And again, as I've set out at various points, the National Planning Policy Framework is clear that the evidence base needs to be comprehensive but proportional to the task of plan making. So whilst I appreciate communities, I think at the time of this examination, have perhaps been bamboozled by detailed, informal and formal proposals about what may or may not happen, I'd like people to just be reminded again, my task is about what's in the plan, rather than perhaps what individual developers or landowners may wish to see take place on their sites. Now, as the hearings have progressed, I've been keeping a daily note of action points, and the key areas of action that I am expecting the Council to progress are as follows, and this is perhaps just an opportunity for the Council if it's got any comments or remarks it wants to make about these kind of action points, to air them now. In my view, the priority number one as a result of these examination hearings is the further review of the housing land supply, which is updating the trajectory of existing supply, reprofiling the sites as we've discussed in terms of how they are likely to come forward, refinements to some elements of supply, I think to reduce the risk of double counting, so that the outcome is that we've got a clarified kind of baseline position of what the known supply will yield. I would then like the Council to look at that supply and assess it against the step trajectory that we discussed back on day one now of these hearing sessions. And to include within that, I'll describe it as sensitivity testing, so as to whether there's a 5-year deliverable supply, preferably on Sedgefield. So for those not familiar with that phraseology, that's trying to deal with the shortfall within the next 5-year period. But I also want the Council to look at the alternative scenarios of Liverpool, so looking at the shortfall over the plan period, and to also look at a hybrid, we're going to call it the sedge pool option. I'll characterise that as doing as much of the shortfall as you can in a shorter period as possible. And I think the outcome of that work will clearly inform whether main modifications are necessary to ensure a deliverable supply, and to advise within the known extent of the available housing land supply what degree of resilience there is over the remainder of the plan period. I know parties made submissions that should be around about 10%. I know the council presented an alternative figure at the start of the stage 1 hearings. So it's just shy of that 10% figure. I think it'd be useful to know, as a consequence of all our discussions, where we've ended up. We'll come on to time frames for kind of doing all of this shortly, but I mean, is that reasonably clear to the council in terms of that sort of number 1 priority? I think it's probably just worth re-emphasising, looking at some familiar faces in the audience. I hope I made it clear on day 1. I'm not going to recommend to the council to put in which additional sites, if it needs to put in additional sites. That is going to be a matter for the council, if that is the outcome of that additional work. Just to, again, re-emphasise that point. In terms of priority number 2, there are 2 issues here. It's around the deliverability of the proposed allocation at site EMP 7, the Bowling Green Lane employment allocation. I've indicated to the council that I will issue further supplementary questions on this for the council, and I think it needs to involve the local highways authority as well in respect to the deliverability of this site. I'm mindful that 26 hectares is about a third of the strategic employment land supply, which is significant on several levels. So I am going to be looking for further clarity on what can or can't be done at this location, and then following that, what the kind of the fallback options are likely to be. And allied to that, similarly, is the deliverability of proposed allocation HSG4 at Bedworth Woodlands. Again, I will be issuing supplementary questions intended for both the council and the local highway authority to respond to, please. I don't know if there's anything further the council wishes to clarify on both of those. I think the issues were aired last week. And then in terms of priority number 3, in terms of actions that have come from the discussions over the last few weeks, I think these are just observations for those of you who can't read my mind. I'm not expecting you to be mind readers, but from the discussions that we've had, I'm certainly looking for additional clarity around the access to the HSG2 Arbury site over the longer term, and that was discussed. Secondly, around the justification of the landscape buffer designation at HSG1. And thirdly, I'm not sure what additional evidence the council is going to present to me, but just to sort of flag up, I'm still mulling over the evidence on the landscape and ecological designations around the Bedworth Woodlands site, and what kind of sustainable pattern of development arises from that. Again, I think that's probably going to be helped and informed by the additional work or clarifications in relation to deliverable highways solutions. So that was my third priority area. And then finally, my sort of fourth area sort of brings a number of things together. I think, as we've discussed, additional work that arises around the land supply, I think will require a revisiting. I emphasise in a proportional way of the strategic housing land availability assessments. We discussed yesterday about an update kind of summary of the kind of key elements of the infrastructure delivery plan, where things have progressed, and then underpinning a lot of this will be around additional kind of updates to the sustainability appraisal. I know at various stages of the discussion through statements of common ground, and the council has looked and agreed a number of things with parties on aspects of the sustainability appraisal. I think I said in relation to the housing land supply situation, I did not or do not see at this stage a need for a further call for sites. It seems to me the council's got a good handle on what sites are out there. So to borrow from Eric Morecambe, my instinct is you probably know the right notes, it's just whether they're in the right order. In terms of those priority areas then, I think to move matters forward, I intend to issue supplementary questions on EMP 7 and HSG 4 next week, with a focused deadline for response. Now, in saying that, I'm mindful that the local highway authority advised in evidence that they could kind of do their review work. I think Mr. Sims' evidence was in a matter of weeks. He was very careful not to specify how many weeks, but I think given its significance to kind of moving things forward, it's clearly something we need to have sooner rather than later. In saying that, I appreciate Easter is coming. There's always staff resourcing issues. I don't know if the local highway authority are going to be involved at the rugby examinations in terms of their capacity. But just thinking, we've got to take all of these things into consideration. But I'll set out in a moment where I think kind of the time frame going forward will look like. I think in light of these stage 2 hearings, I will be issuing interim findings in a similar way to the stage 1. To assist the council in moving forward on hopefully preparing main modifications. But it will be contingent on getting some of that additional information that I've just outlined. And then on receipt of those interim findings from stage 2, the council obviously needs to take a view, but hopefully it's then at a point it can then progress to finalising a schedule of main modifications, which are, again, I stress, are the council's main modifications. I think in fairness, as the examination has proceeded, I think the council has recognised where a number of main modifications will be needed or likely to be necessary. And I think I can probably say at this stage, from everything I've read and heard, including what's in the statement of common grounds, and they appear to be cogent kind of changes. So in my view, I can sort of see the council, subject to capacity, being able to progress and prepare that schedule of main modifications, obviously liaising with others on the content. As I've said at other sessions, as main modifications, they will need to be consulted on and accompanied by an updated sustainability appraisal that reflects and responds to those main modifications. I think it may be useful as part of that sustainability appraisal, whether it's in an updated non-technical summary that just kind of captures, there are many stages already to sustainability appraisal. Some have now added to some, it's been added to in terms of NBBC 36 on the non-strategic sites, then be obviously an update as part of the main modifications, so something that just kind of captures the stages that we've been through. It's my view that the final list of main modifications should be reasonably focused. I think there's been a number of changes that have been discussed as part of these examination hearings, which are more about improving the presentation and clarity of the document. They're probably not necessary for soundness, but I'm happy to work with the council or liaise with them on what will be in the final list of main modifications, the additional modifications. We probably should also do site alteration. There will need to be a published list of alterations to the policies map. That sets out broadly, I think, the scope of kind of what needs to be done in kind of the next steps. Are there any sort of further points or clarifications from the council? No? Okay, so in terms of sort of time frames and sort of indicatively the kind of the next steps, again, this is subject to change, but certainly from where I'm sitting, I would hope that in about a month's time, so towards the end of April, you know where we are on the housing and land supply situation, you know where we are in terms of EMP 7 and HSG 4, and the council will have my interim findings to then prepare its schedule of main modifications. I appreciate there's a number of areas of kind of additional evidence that have been sought, but it would seem as a starting point reasonable to be kind of looking at main modifications probably towards the end of May. Again, I'm not going to set these kind of time frames in stone, but just thinking through some of the practicalities. And in terms of that, can the council remind me, in terms of proposed main modifications, will that need reporting to a committee, or is the delegated authority to look at that?
I think there is delegated authority, but I think it depends on the what's in those main modifications. However, the annual council is in the middle of May, so there shouldn't be any reason why, even if we need authority, we can't get it by that time.
Thank you. And then moving from that point forward, I think in terms of consistency with the council's statement of community involvement and regulations, there needs to be at least a 6-week consultation on the main modifications, which may well be in the sort of the summer months. And obviously the council will need to consider the responses to those modifications, and so will I. Which, on the basis that that consultation does not generate the need for a further hearing session, we're probably looking indicatively at my report being available around about early September of this year. I'm also mindful that I set out 2 weeks ago, we're also in the process of updates to the National Planning Policy Framework, and it may well be that there will be an opportunity for people to comment on that. That may run, who knows, simultaneously or over part of the same consultation with main modifications. In saying that, I think the council, through some of the discussions we've had as part of the individual hearing sessions, I think is already sensibly starting to contemplate alignment with the some of the direction of travel in the emerging National Planning Policy Framework. Are there any questions or comments from the council on that sort of broad roadmap and its how feasible, deliverable that sounds?
No, fine, thank you.
Obviously, some of it hinges on the county council, but we understand they've already started some
Particularly on HSG 4 and
yeah.
those two issues.
thank you. As I say, I mean, I'm not going to set those dates in stone, as I say. I mean, they're just an indicative guide that's hopefully helpful to people here in terms of how things are likely to proceed. Okay, are there any further general observations or remarks the Council wishes to make in relation to the last 5 weeks? You're probably ready to lie down in a darkened room.
Now, other than, like you, thanking everybody for attending, unless you've no doubt noticed there's only Dale and I here, so particularly like to thank you for sticking to the timetable every day, because that isn't easy to do.
Thank you. Well, in these days of customer feedback, the Council will be pleased to know we'll be getting an opportunity to comment to Pins.
Good
So, yeah, hopefully I haven't done something too terrible. Okay, well, it's probably now time for me to kind of bring these hearings to a close. I mean, firstly, can I thank everybody who has attended the hearing sessions for their contributions. I hope that those who have participated have come away from those sessions having felt able to make those submissions. As I've stressed at various points, written submissions do carry equal weight to what has been put before me in these hearings. But I am grateful for the manner in which people have participated and the considerable knowledge that people have about the issues that the plan is seeking to address, the borough more generally, and the proposed sites specifically. So thank you for that. I'd also like to thank the Council's team, and I extend that to include your colleagues at Warwickshire County Council for your hard work throughout the examination. It's not just the hearings. As I say, it's been 9 months to date, so I'm appreciative of all the work that's been done since June, including all the hearing statements that have been provided on time, and the general willingness of the Council to discuss and consider changes with representatives. You must have read my notes, Mrs. Morgan, because I was going to say I appreciate that at the moment the Council's team is small, and it's not been lost on me that both yourself and Mr. Peckett have been here every day, and you've always sought to answer the points raised. And again, I appreciate the way in which the Council's team has conducted itself, and just to recognise to the wider team, Mr. Daly's paw prints are on various things. The evidence from Mr. Powell, not least Mr. Richardson, whose office I've been in for the last 5 weeks. He's probably keen to reclaim it. And then finally, and most importantly, I'd particularly like to thank the programme officers. So I'd like to thank Minnie, who's at the back of the room, and her colleague Carmel, for helping to make sure that everything is run as smoothly as possible. Personally, they've helped on various things, issues that I've created and always found solutions, and they've done it in a very professional and efficient manner. So again, it's very much appreciated. Just finally, just reiterate, I mean, I will be carefully considering all the points that have been put forward to me before coming to my conclusions. As I say, I will be in further dialogue with the Council on how the examination progresses. That will be kept up to date on the examination website. I would encourage anybody who has an interest in the plan examination to keep following progress. If you're already registered and in the process and get to main modifications, you will be consulted. In terms of the practicalities around the reporting process, from the Council's perspective, Bristol will be in touch in due course, including the timings for what will be a fact-check report that the Council gets in the first instance. Just to assure the Council, we'll be aiming to get that with you as soon as we can. Just to remind, it is a fact-check report, so it's about accuracy rather than the substance of my conclusions. I think that is all I wanted to say at this stage. It has been a short session. I hope it's given people a flavour of where the examination is now proceeding to. But I'm now going to bring these stage 2 hearings to a close. Thank you.
Thank you.